We have much to discuss.
With this show, I filled my anime quota for the year. In no way do I consider myself an anime fan, but to be an impartial TV critic, I must allow myself to watch shows deemed worthy. My anime adventure started in 2020 with the cult classic Death Note, which, to say the least, was fantastic in every conceivable way. For my TV watching experience, this year I decided to watch every available episode of Attack on Titan, and it did not disappoint. The first two seasons of the show are some of the most intense and exciting episodes of any show I have ever seen. The action is absolutely fantastic, and I cannot express just how awesome the ODM gear is. The plot of the show is exciting and very original, giving me a new dystopian world that I can fall in love with. The premise alone allows for so much creativity and freedom that's been missing from modern television. There are major plot twists that are mind blowing and epic, there are character arcs that are inspiring and a joy to watch, and I still can't give enough praise to the action, goddammit. As the show progresses, it becomes less of an apocalypse show and more of a military show. But I haven't seen any show pull off a change of tone as well as this one. The progression is absolutely perfect, and the show doesn't even need to try to keep your attention. Probably the only complaint that I can give this show is that there are a handful of characters in desperate need of a lot more character development, as they are way hollower than they probably should be. And that complaint itself is merely a sacrifice that the show made to have even more epic action scenes that, once again, are awesome. Sadly, watching all available episodes of the show led me to realize that the end of the show will not be released until 2023, which I wasn't aware of going into the show. So, I am currently waiting patiently like everybody else for the rest, and I very much hope it ends with a bang. Until then, you should definitely check this one out if you haven't seen it yet. Damn, American Horror Story wishes it could be this emotional, compelling, consistently good, cohesive, stylistic, well written, engaging, well acted, tight scripted, genuinely scary, etc. That about summarizes my whole thoughts on The Haunting of Hill House, but let me elaborate a little bit more. The Haunting of Hill House is the first show I've seen that actually does horror well. That's not to say shows like American Horror Story or The Walking Dead are bad by any means, but what they lack compared to Hill House is genuine scariness. Hill House goes for your classic ghostly horror show, with freakish jump scares, intensely terrifying sequences, and an overall unease with every scene. The show manages to find a sweet spot by actively engaging you with a rich story and then pulling the rug out from beneath you and giving you a really good scare. The story follows a family of 7 who have been tortured and broken by a haunted house they grew up in. The show actively switches between the characters when they lived in the house and what they're up to in the modern day, showing us how each and every character has been forever changed by the events of their past. We follow the characters as they piece together the story of the house and attempt to overcome their trauma, while terrible things come to haunt them yet again. I'm not going to say much more about the show because I highly recommend you watch it if you haven't already. But before I finish this segment, I want to briefly mention that episode 6 of the show is one of the greatest episodes of any show I watched in 2021. It's a cinematic feast, a bone chilling story, and an absolute gem of an episode, so once again, please check out this show. Infinity Train is a show about people suffering from their internal struggles and learning how to deal with them and grow from them. The characters, who are in their time of need, find themselves on a magical train designed to show them what they need to learn. As the characters move from car to car, they gain new friends, face new challenges, and overcome their own obstacles. Every season brings a new and exciting adventure, with lovable characters, compelling stories, a great sense of humor, and an insane level of creativity brought to you by the concept of the show. My absolute favorite thing about the show, however, is the atmosphere it manages to create. The music, the writing, and the animation pair up to give off a very unique, mysterious, nearly hypnotic charm that's almost indescribable and makes the story so much more engaging and compelling. Infinity Train is that rare breed of cartoons that only Cartoon Network can pull off well, and it's a shame that we most likely will never get to see the end of the story, as for no good reason it was cancelled prematurely. The best thing we can do as fans of this show is give it as much attention as possible in hopes of persuading Cartoon Network to give it another chance. If you haven't seen the show yet, I implore you to check it out. It's a very quick watch, and I guarantee you'll love it the way I do.
Why are you police officers?
I blew up Malaysia.
Once upon a time, I thought that watching Arrested Development would be the end of my modern sitcom journey. I thought it was the last piece of a four-part puzzle consisting of The Office, Parks and Rec, Arrested Development, and Community. But I was wrong. Like, really wrong. At some point in this last year, I was shown the vast world of critically acclaimed modern sitcoms, and I knew my journey was far from over, leading me to the 9-9, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, a show about detectives in the NYPD living an exciting comedic life. This might just be recency bias, but I'm really starting to believe that this show is my second favorite show of those aforementioned modern sitcoms, but I can safely say that Community hasn't been dethroned as my favorite sitcom. This show lasted me about 4 full months, and that's due to a lot of procrastination early on in the show when I was juggling many shows at the exact same time. It took me about 2 full weeks to watch seasons 3 through 8 because that was essentially the only show that I watched for those 2 weeks, and I do not regret it. This show was incredible. Every single character is so lovable, and it's hard for me to choose my favorite between Jake, Captain Holt, Rosa, and Terry. I wasn't a huge fan of Gina, but she leaves the show early on, so it really doesn't matter that much. Most episodes revolve around detective work, so while the characters are entertaining you with their personalities, you also get a mini mystery to enjoy as the cherry on top. There are some fantastic recurring episodes and characters, like Doug Judy, the criminal who slowly becomes Jake's best friend by the end of the series, and the Halloween heist, which is an exciting heist with twists and turns that gets more and more complicated with every season. There's so much more that I can talk about, but what really matters is the point that I want to make. Brooklyn Nine-Nine was probably the most fun show I've watched this year. From start to finish, this show is an onslaught of fantastic jokes and a beautiful union of many fantastic characters into what they consider themselves to be a family. Eat your heart out, Arrested Development, because I found my favorite sitcom of the year. Or so I thought.
Think, Mark! Think!
I had many shows that I planned on watching as soon as I started this project, but there were a handful of shows that sprung up out of nowhere and caught my attention. Invincible was by far the most surprising show that came out this year, just in terms of how truly amazing it turned out to be. An important detail as to why this show works so well for me is because I went into it completely blind, which, according to most people, was insanely difficult. As most of you may know, the most important scene of the show became a meme almost instantly. So 90% of people's introduction to the show was because of that meme alone. Luckily for me, though, I had good friends who implored me to check out the show before I saw any spoilers. And I'm going to offer the same benefit to you, as I highly recommend you go and watch the show before I say anything at all about it, if in case you haven't already. Alright, now that that has been said, let me tell you my completely original and unique opinion of this show. It's fantastic. Truly, one of the most intense, mind blowing, and exceptionally written shows I have had the pleasure of watching. It all works for me. The action, the violence, the characters, it really has it all. Not to mention the incredible voice cast. Stephen Yeun and J.K. Simmons as the two main characters? Holy shit, it's a dream come true! Those are literally two of my all time favorite actors, and they're just fantastic in their roles. But everyone else is great too. Literally all of the central characters are voiced by people who I highly respect and do such an incredible job in their roles. And the writing pushes the acting even further, with some fantastic dialogue that really sells each and every character perfectly. Robert Kirkman is a fantastic writer and did such a great job of transitioning his comics onto the small screen, much like Walking Dead. Which leads me to the story. Dear God, the story is brilliant. Omni-Man is one of the most intimidating characters I've ever seen, and is slowly built up over the course of the season as the most dangerous being in cinematic history. Most of the middle is just the progression of the main story, that keeps changing and introducing things in preparation for the bombastic final episode. And holy shit, that final episode is insane. That last episode had my jaw on the floor with just how gruesome they were willing to go with it. That fight scene will go down as one of the best action scenes of all time, and to top it all off, the destruction is ended by an insanely well acted and emotional scene that became a meme just by how damn crazy good the acting was. Seriously, J.K. Simmons is a gift, and he deserves so much praise. Words cannot easily describe the rapidly changing emotions this show thrusts upon you, and there will probably never be a superhero show that'll start off as good as this one. I have such high hopes for Season 2, and I really hope it can match this season, or somehow beat the season in quality.
By the power of moonlight, I have risen, Hoot Hoot!
Owl House, Owl House, Owl House, Owl House. Minecraft Steve, fuck. Alright, Owl House, let's go. Wow, this show was a welcome surprise. I spent many months watching dark and serious shows like American Horror Story or Better Call Saul to the point that I desperately needed something upbeat and happy. And I knew that Disney was most likely the best thing to turn to. I haven't been on the Disney Channel scene since Gravity Falls ended, so obviously, coming back, I was a bit skeptical of its quality. But once I got through the first episode of The Owl House, I knew that nothing has changed and they're still bringing their A game. This show is a true spiritual successor to Gravity Falls, both in terms of atmosphere and the fact that Alex Hirsch voices a quarter of the full cast. But this show is different than Gravity Falls in the sense that every single episode matters. Gravity Falls is still one of the best series I've ever seen, but I can make a case for one or two episodes that didn't push the character arcs or main story. Like, at all. And while I still like those episodes, The Owl House really does something incredible and adds none of that filler whatsoever. Characters change every episode, and the writers aren't afraid at all to change the status quo and move the main story along. The show is only 1.5 seasons at the time of me writing this, and it's already done so much more than shows that are 3 times its length. And the characters are just wonderful. It's a great sign for the quality of a TV show when nearly every single character is equally your favorite. Last Airbender, Gravity Falls, even Breaking Bad have such amazingly written three-dimensional characters that it's hard to hate anybody. Except Skylar. This show is on par, where I can't decide if Luz, King, Ida, Amity, Hootie, Gus, or that weird redheaded soccer ball kid with the big nose are my favorite characters. They're all so charismatic and lovable that each and every episode packs a lot of heart. On top of that, the action scenes are exhilarating, the jokes are surprisingly sharp, and the episode Knock Knock Knockin' on Hootie's Door is television at its finest. The only flaws I ever saw on the show took place very early on, where I thought that the episode structure was pretty vanilla and taught very simple and elementary life lessons. But obviously, this is still a kids' show, so expecting them to break the conventions and cliches of modern animation would be asking a bit too much, anyways. Except for the fact that they actually did do that further in the show. Would you look at that? The only real complaint I had with the show resolved itself within the first season. Truly inspiring. If you haven't checked out this show yet and you've been waiting for someone to tell you to, then here you have it. Go watch it right now.
Back in the 90s, I was in a very famous TV show.
BoJack Horseman is an incredible journey from start to finish, and there's not much I can say that hasn't already been said 100 times. For an adult animated show about anthropomorphic animals living regular human lives, it's all incredibly unassuming. Even the first few episodes seem like a very generic adult comedy, with dry humor and a cast of very quirky characters. It's not until the latter half of the first season when we get several glimpses at what the show will become. BoJack is a bad person, and starting from the beginning, we watch as his bad actions continue to negatively affect his life path, and time after time again do we see him try to do better, but flounder in the moment and make everything worse. Every season changes the dynamics of BoJack's life, leading to many highs and lows in his life and the lives of the people he associates with. There are so many great moments all throughout the show that teach deep and hard-hitting lessons about relationships, drug abuse, extreme emotions, and the uncertainty of life. There is a pattern in the show, where the second to last episode of each season provides a major turning point in the show, usually having something horrible happen because of BoJack's actions. There are also some out-of-nowhere episodes that are feats of writing and directing, like an episode without dialogue, or an episode that only features BoJack giving a eulogy for 26 minutes straight. All of these episodes are some of the best episodes of any show I have watched for this video. These episodes are unforgettable and really make your head spin in the best way possible. The best episode by far, though, is the 15th episode of the last season, where BoJack confronts every major traumatic event of his life and learns to accept and grow from those moments. BoJack also confronts mortality in a way I've never seen done on television that's incredibly dark, but taken very seriously. To say the least, my jaw was on the floor after this episode. Now, to rewind a little, there are a few things about this show that hold it back from being the best show of the year. Several seasons of the show can get a little slow at times, several character arcs can be a little uninteresting at times, and while there are some god-tier jokes in this show, I don't think the humor always lands. Even with these flaws, I cannot refrain myself from giving this show anything other than a perfect 10 out of 10, because it's truly something special. If you're ready for a show that'll change your life, then I cannot recommend this show enough to you. Game of Thrones was the very first show that I watched for this project. I knew that I needed a big show to start off on in order to set the standard high for the rest of the shows, and boy, did I set that bar high. It's already been so long since I watched the show, and I still remember the full story like I watched it just yesterday. I'll quickly go through the seasons, but I'll refrain from any major spoilers because this is not a show that I want to spoil for any of you. Season 1 is a great world builder that sets the tone for the seasons to come. The very first episode alone has many great scenes that serves as the show's sharp hook. We meet all of the beloved characters who will probably at one point or another die gruesomely, but for this first season, there isn't too much violence or war. Instead, this season serves as the base for conflicts to come, and boy do they come, because by the end of this season, the lines have been crossed, and as a viewer, I couldn't be any more engaged. Season 2 focuses on those rising conflicts between the large capitals of Westeros, and also on some smaller stories taking place in the corners of the world that will have much bigger ramifications later on. This season was probably my least favorite season in the first half of the show because the story is pretty slow moving, and there is a moderately large focus on the Baratheon story, who is by far the least interesting batch of characters in the entire show. By the end of season 2, King's Landing is properly shown to be the juggernaut everyone fears they are, and there are some very entertaining betrayals that you would not expect. Season 3 takes the show to some new heights, ensuring that no characters are safe from harm, and major turning points can happen when you least expect them. This season is a roller coaster from start to finish. Every single character gets their own journey and overcomes serious obstacles for the sake of survival, and by this point in the show, I was deeply invested in the lore of the world and its inhabitants. Season 4 was the final piece of evidence that I needed to know that this show was a masterpiece, and I don't put that lightly. The story goes from entertaining to phenomenally well written and masterfully handled this time around, with moments that will make you cheer, cry, and fall in love with the fantastic characters. This season has moments that are some of my all time favorite scenes in any show ever, and the icing on this delicious cake is for the first time in 4 seasons there is not a single boring character in the show. Somehow, despite knowing which characters are in the right or in the wrong, I love them all equally and wish nothing bad would happen to any of them. Special props go to my boy Jaime Lannister, who I thought would be a completely unlikable douchebag at the start of the show, and he somehow became the most lovable character I think I've ever seen on television. I cannot stress just how much I love this man who has intentionally tried to kill a child and is in an active sexual relationship with his own sister. This guy, this character is one of the most emotionally moving characters in the whole show. Holy shit, the writing is magical. But enough of this wonderful character, let's talk about his equally amazing brother instead. This season gives the intellectual dwarf his time to shine, when he has to defend himself for a murder he didn't commit. His arc through this season is the most inspiring and emotional arc through the whole show, and the ending of this arc in the last episode of the season is fantastic in every way and proves once and for all that Tyrion Lannister is the best character in the show as well. Season 5 is a slower season as the dust settles from the chaos of the prior 2 seasons. Much like Season 2, this season works to stir up conflicts and major events for the near future. But there are many great episodes that establish the power and motive for each of the kingdoms, and many great battles with massive stakes. The finale this season, much like the finales of seasons prior, have major events with huge ramifications on the rest of the series. Jaime gets another fantastic arc this season that ends in one of my favorite scenes of the show. Other major characters find themselves with new allies and new enemies. It's only occurred to me now, despite the fact that I'm all the way up to season 6 at this point, that I've only touched on one or two of the major stories all happening at the same time. Jon Snow is debatedly the main character of the show and has had some really intense and emotional arcs through all the seasons. And Daenerys, another key player, has been working hard alongside even more wonderfully charming characters to abolish slavery around the world. Jon, Dany, and the King's Landing stories are all definitely the 3 most prominent stories taking place in the show, but it's still important to acknowledge that there are 5 or 6 other stories happening around Westeros, all equally important for the remainder of the show. Season 6 is a continuation of many arcs happening in Season 5, including war, the emotional unification of characters who haven't seen each other in years, and a rising religious threat that needs to be taken down before it's too late. The finale of this season is a conclusive one that ends many of the major conflicts and puts many of the chess pieces in their proper places for the final 2 seasons. But there's just one problem with that. This is the point where the writing quality of the show dips. While season 6 was very good, it's important to note that the show was taking its story almost entirely from the existing novels, but the novels still aren't done yet, and the last book that was released only takes us to the end of season 5. Season 7 isn't bad by any means, don't get me wrong, but it's still apparent that the writing quality is not as masterful as it used to be. Some characters don't act exactly the same, and a lot of the smaller details that used to make the world feel real aren't taken seriously and end up making the show less engaging. This season also happens to be another supporting season that yet again will mainly be used to set up the upcoming final season. The first novel thing about this season, however, is how it is able to combine characters and their storylines into one main story, and the number of side quests happening all at once is shortened significantly. Season 8 of the show is where the huge problems lie. It is super painful to admit this, but this season ruins the whole show. It concludes all of the major stories in epic battles of grand proportion, but it ruins the character arcs and completely ruins the direction that the show is heading, at least in terms of the character Daenerys, in my opinion, of course. I don't completely hate the ending, but I really just wish the ending of the show would have been something truly spectacular, a perfect cap to an amazing series, but instead, what we got was a mediocre ending, and that hurts a lot, because now I can't tell people that it's a perfect show. Now I have to say that it's a near perfect show, and that's just not the same. No matter what, though, I have to give him credit for the most consistent thing throughout the acting. Writing quality aside, every single character is performed flawlessly from start to finish. The world building would not be the same if it weren't for such incredible acting to really sell you on it all. And I'm grateful for the ability to have gotten so immersed into such a wonderful show. Oh yeah, did I mention the nudity? Yeah, there's a lot of nudity in this show. They really don't hold back on it. It was pretty awkward watching this at school. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia was the easiest first place I could have ever possibly given. This might very well be my favorite show of all time, and much like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I didn't even know it existed until the day I started watching it. That day was in early November of 2021, and I was easily able to finish it by the end of the year, even though it is 15 seasons long with 162 episodes. For a show with so many episodes, you'd think there would be somewhat of a decline in quality as it goes along like most great shows, but no, the show is still at its prime today and has never had a bad episode. But to get to the point, Always Sunny is simply the funniest show ever. Every single episode is hysterical, thanks in no small part to the perfect 5-star cast of Caitlin Olsen, Rob McElhenney, Glenn Howerton, Charlie Day, and the legendary Danny DeVito. The point of the show, for those of you that don't know, is, well, it's nothing. The spotlight is on the 5 characters who are the biggest scumbags in all of Philly and the interactions they have in their life. As the gang goes about their day, they will either try to take advantage of it or fall victim to their own shortcomings. Usually both.
I am untethered and my rage knows no bounds!
I've been rewatching all of this show for the entirety of 2022, which is something I haven't done with any of the other shows I watched on this list, but I just can't get enough. It's awesome. It's perfect. It's the best show I watched in 2021. So that's it then. I'm done ranking all the shows I watched in 2021. And now that I know how difficult it would be to do it again, you will most certainly not get a 2022 TV Showdown, sadly. As we wrap up now, let me elaborate a little and explain that I've been working on this series of videos since November of 2021. The first segment I edited was for MODOK, and the rest came after, of course. On average, it takes 2 to 3 hours per segment, and if you add all that up, it's a lot of fucking work. And I'm a procrastinator, if you couldn't tell, but you should be as happy as I am that I at least finished this project in 2022. If this leaked into next year, that would have been embarrassing, right? I like to view this project as my starting off point for wanting to do more video essays, but now that I see how much work goes into that, it remains to be seen how much more I'll work at it. The biggest payoff, however, is how much better my editing has gotten. It's not great by any means, and I'm too lazy to edit this part, so it's just going to be this PNG probably, but I really think I've improved over the year, and that should be reflected as you watch every segment in order. Anyways, I'm tired, and I'm ready to close this out, so thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on this long awaited TV Showdown finale. And I'll see you when I see you.